Hello, everyone. This is Steve with Aptera Owners Club. The gas prices these days made me think of how great it is that Aptera is solar powered. And I was just thinking how I put in solar panels on my house about a little over 10 years ago. And at that time, when tried to put in the solar panels, and I talked to the salesman, that was the first time I ever had a salesman try to not sell me their product, because he did the analysis on my electric bill, because I don't use a lot of electricity generally, and he looked at the prices I was paying for electricity and then how much the solar panels would cost, and he said, I think it would take you like 13, 14 years to pay back your solar panels based on your usage, and I don't know if solar panels are a good idea for you. And I told him at that time, I don't care if it makes financial sense. I just want the solar panels. And so I got them, and that was, one of the better decisions I've made on that front, because electric prices have gone up since I put it in, and I've gotten EVs, so my electric usage has gone up quite a bit since I put them in, and so it's more than paid for itself. And Aptera basically localizes the solar panels even more, because electric prices and gas prices are based on a bunch of factors that are totally out of our control. And we can't control what makes crude oil prices go up and what makes crude oil prices go down. I was looking at this graph of crude oil prices, and this is a graph starting in like 1997 till now. And if you look, the gas price, the crude oil prices are very volatile. And you see, like right here, there was a huge run up in price. This was when the global economy was kind of overheating. You guys remember? And then in 2008, we had the huge crash. There was the global financial crisis. So these are things that we have no control over, like the economy's overheating. Like, what did we have to do with that? Not much. And then the whole crash happened, because banks were like giving out tons of bad loans and doing all kinds of gambling with collateralized debt obligations and all kinds of stuff like that, which I still don't understand very well. But then, it crashed the entire global financial system. So then the things crashed, and then it recovered, and then the prices went up. And then around 2014, this is when like fracking kind of took over, especially in the United States. So then prices dropped, and they kept dropping, and then it kind of stabilized. And then if you look at this 5-year graph, look, there was a time in April of 2020 when actually gas was negative $30 a barrel. People were actually paying you to take barrels of oil, because what happened was, you guys all know that in early 2020, that's when the pandemic started. Everything shut down, and I don't know if you remember the early days of the pandemic. Like, people actually stopped doing things. Like, I remember it was so odd, because I'm a quote an essential worker, so I still was going to work, and I remember going to work in the early days, like in March, and there was no one on the road. I live in Southern California, and it's the first time I've ever seen no traffic on the road. It was ridiculous. And so global demand for crude oil just fell through the ground. And there was this huge glut of oil, and they couldn't even store it. So people were basically, if you could take oil physically, if you could physically take delivery of oil, people were paying you to take oil for about a week or so during that time. And then it slowly recovered. It was like hanging around $40 a barrel, and then it stabilized around 50. And then the economy starts picking up, people start going back to work. And what happened here, and I learned this from this podcast, and I listened to this podcast called Planet Money, which I highly recommend. I think it's a great podcast. But they had a story several weeks ago, and this was before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It was called Backwardation in the Oil Market. I recommend you go listen to it if you got 8 minutes to listen to something. It's very educational. But basically, they were saying that when the oil prices went negative, a lot of oil producers shut down their wells, because they were like, you know what? We're making too much oil. We don't know when this is going to recover. We got to cut our losses, shut down production. And once you shut down production, it's really hard to bring it back up. And they also see that, like, the oil companies see that in the future, we're going to move away from oil eventually. So a lot of them are like kind of less interested in kind of prospecting and drilling for new oil. So a lot of that's not coming online, so it's ramped up. And then at this point, backwardation is when future oil prices are lower than current oil prices, and that's what was happening before the Ukraine invasion. And now that's, so they thought that even though it was headed up, that it was going to head down soon because production was slowly going up, people were coming back online, and I'm sure you guys are aware of that these oil prices are the oil producers attempt to tightly control these oil prices. OPEC basically is a conglomerate of oil producing nations, and what they do is they control their production. They could produce way more than they do, but they control their production because if they produced at their full rate, they would flood the global market with oil, and then the prices would fall, and then they just wouldn't make as much money. So it's basically a cartel where they're controlling the market. And if they constrain production too much and crude oil prices go up like they are now, and then prices of crude go up, then people will just, because of the prices are so high, people will stop buying their things as much. And they don't want that, because if prices are too high, then people will start looking for alternative sources of raw materials and of energy than petroleum, which OPEC doesn't want. They want to keep it at a steady rate that is good so that they make money at a high enough rate that it makes money, but not so high that people start looking for alternative sources. So they will. So they basically tightly control how much oil they make. So when they saw these prices going up, they decided to start increasing production. So if a non-OPEC country increases production, they just decrease their production to try to stabilize the prices. And if other countries, non-OPEC countries, decrease production, they will increase production so that it doesn't get too expensive, so that people start looking for other alternatives. Anyways, there's just so many things that we can't control about these oil prices. We can't control wars. We can't control what OPEC does. We can't control recessions. We can't control technological things like fracking. These things all change the prices of oil and of energy, and the same thing will happen with electricity. So having solar panels on your car and on your house, basically, you can control that. That's like a thing that we personally can control, and Aptera gives it so that you can be almost off-grid and not have to use any electricity from a source outside of yourself that's built into the car, as long as you're not driving a tremendous amount, which is like an amazing concept if you think about it. And a lot of you guys that have been watching this channel since the beginning know that we did a kind of a dive a long time ago and figured out that Aptera is probably using the SunPower Maxion panels, which are really good panels. They last a long time. Their degradation rate is low, and their energy efficiency is quite high, and they're quite flexible and robust. So for a lot of reasons, I think Aptera made a great choice going with the SunPower Maxion cells. And they showed a video a while back about testing different encapsulation techniques. So anyways, I just thought that this was a really important thing, especially in light of recent events, that we control as much of our own destiny as possible. And I think Aptera is a first step into that area. And now that I have solar on my house, and I bike to work every day, so I generally don't drive a car ever, and my family drives a car, but it's a Honda Clarity plug-in. So I fill up our whole family fills up on gas about once a month, and the Clarity gas tank is quite small, so a fill up is about less than $50. It was less than $50, and now it's about $50, $60 to fill up. So if you're spending $40 a month on gas and gas prices go up 50%, well, if going from $40 to $60 isn't a big hit. But if you're spending $400 a month on gas and you go from $400 to $600, well, that's a pretty big jump. So I think everything we can do to try to control our own energy usage is probably a good thing, given the state of the world and how things are so many things are out of control in terms of out of our own control in terms of energy prices and things. So, who knows where this is going to end up? Maybe we're going to head to $140 a barrel gas like back in 2008. I think we're certainly headed there because we're putting sanctions on Russian oil now, and that's Russia produces about 7% of the global oil. So that's a pretty significant portion of the global oil commodities market. And while the OPEC nations and other nations are ramping up production, you can't just flip a switch and it doesn't come online that quickly. So there's going to be some lag time in this. But we should all feel good about getting a solar-powered car and having more control over our energy usage and our transportation needs. Thanks for watching, and have a great day, everyone.